So, welcome to lecture on air pollution and mitigation SWAYAM course that we are proposing. This is again continuation of the previous lecture in which we discussed atmospheric carbonaceous aerosols, and I defined in the previous lectures that what are different types of aerosols: organic carbon, brown carbon, elemental carbon. What is how a primary organic aerosols and then secondary organic aerosols, how do you differentiate, what are their different properties and how they can be differentiated. So, this is just to again sum up. Carbonaceous aerosols, they are usually defined. I am not talking about here, I am excluding the part brown carbon because it has to be discussed separately. So, brown carbon I am not including. Broadly, the carbonaceous aerosols are defined into two. Of course, brown carbon is there, we will discuss that one also. The properties are defined into two forms, one is called elemental carbon and other is called organic carbon. Now, elemental carbon is also called graphitic carbon, okay, or soot or black carbon, very important terms. People many a times they use soot to refer black carbon, okay, but when they say soot, soot does not really reflect black carbon only, soot can contains other things, other carbon, but when we say soot carbon, then of course you can say that okay, it is mostly black carbon, but soot can be actually the emissions, you are having an emissions that is giving most of the times black carbon, but very little amount of other species. So, that will be soot, but black carbon, when we say black carbon is purely carbon, it does not have anything actually, okay, even it does not have any hydrogen or other things. So, you have like graphitic carbon. So, you have different two forms of carbon, one is graphitic carbon and amorphous carbon. So, graphitic carbon has only carbon, this black carbon is resembles similarly to that one. The only thing is that this carbon, the preparation and then properties are actually graphitic carbon you can prepare in different ways. Black carbon is coming mostly from the incomplete combustion of the fuels, whether it is fossil fuel like petrol, diesel or a kind of coal or biomass burning emissions. So, this kind of things that is coming from the emissions, it called black carbon, and then it is also called as what you call light absorbing carbon. This is very important, okay. So, do not be confused with this one. When I say, now there are two things. So, it is asked that what are the different light absorbing species in the atmosphere. This is generally asked. Many people are asking that what are the light absorbing species. So, when somebody is asking, the first thing will be black carbon or elemental carbon, then you can say that okay, dust is there, you can say that brown carbon is there. These are the three light absorbing species. Now, remember here it is species. If it was in the gaseous form, then it was CO2 will also come, but CO2 is not considered here. It is in the particulate form, okay. So, in the particulate form or in the atmospheric aerosols, what are the light absorbing species is black carbon or elemental carbon and then dust and black carbon. We will discuss about the properties of the dust and brown carbon separately after we finish this one. So, the second thing is that it constitute about 2 to 10% of aerosol mass. So, the concentration of course it can vary, and if you are talking about PM1 or PM 2.5 or PM 10, because this black carbon is associated with the fine mode, typically say 500 nanometer to 1 micrometer particles, something like that. So, this size distribution. So, where the black carbon will be concentrated, if I just calculate black carbon to BC to PM 2.5 or PM ratio, if you take, so for PM only the ratio will be maximum, for PM 2.5 the ratio will be the ratio, if I just calculate this ratio R PM 2.5 and R PM 1 PM 2.5 and R in PM 10. So, this ratio will be much higher for the black carbon, because the black carbon is the main constituent, and the size distribution there will be very little of black carbon species which is having more than 1 micrometer size here for example, and here actually like more than 2.5 up to 2.5 of course will be there, but PM 10 since it contains PM10, it contains all the PM1, PM2.5 and PM10. So, PM10, the other mass will be contributing here. So, this ratio Bc to PM, if you just calculate, it will be R for 1 will be much higher, for PM1, R for 2.5 will be the next, and then ratio will be for PM10 will be this one. Why? Again, do not confuse here. When I say PM1 means it is less than or equals to 1 micrometer diameter. When I say PM2.5, it means 1 micrometer plus, okay. So, 1 micrometer to 1 to 2.5 micrometer, and plus you have less than 1 micrometer. Okay. So, these two things are contributing here. So, because of this one, here the black carbon will be contributing less, here contributing more. So, this ratio will keep on PM mass will keep on increasing. So, the denominator will keep on increasing, but your Bc concentration will not be increasing in that proportional way. So, this will be actually lower, and similarly if you take PM10, this ratio will be further lower, because the Bc in the 2.5 to 10 micrometer size will be very less. So, this ratio will be very low. So, if I just talk about the ratio of black carbon in 2.5 to 10, it is somewhere around 0.8 to 0.9. So, this is very high ratios. So, almost all the carbon is contained in the PM 2.5, very little is there in the 2.5 micrometer or higher. Okay. So, this is usually asked to confuse you that why the black carbon percentage contribution is lower in PM10. So, you have to give the logic very clearly, otherwise it will be very difficult. So, remember the definition of PM1, PM2.5 and PM10. PM2.5 contains PM1 and particles P1 to 2.5 micron as well, whereas PM10 contains PM1 and 1 to 2.5 micron particles and 2.5 to 10. So, this as you keep on increasing, the mass concentration of black carbon in 1 to 2.5 micron and 2.5 to 10 micron will keep on decreasing. So, the concentration of black carbon, total concentration, if you just calculate all the in the different size fractions, it will not increase in that proportion compared to the PM10, because if you remember in the PM10 or coarse mode, it is mostly dominated by the dust aerosols and then sea salt aerosols. So, their contribution will be much higher. So, the ratio will be lower. Okay, I hope this is clear to you now, and if you are not clear, just use some pen and pencil and try to write this one. As I said, this is mainly absorbing in nature. Thus, if it is absorbed, what will happen? It will lead to heat the atmosphere, because once the surrounding becomes cooler, this black carbon particles will release the heat in the atmosphere again, and because of this one they will called as a positive radiative forcing, and that is why it will cause warming in the atmosphere. Okay. On the other hand, organic carbon, they are the major fractions, about 10 to 30% they contribute. They are mostly scattering in nature and have negative radiative forcing. This is very important. So, this means they will having cooling. So, one question that is again asked, that what will happen, which things will define. People generally ask whether composition is important in calculating radiative forcing or not. Now, you can understand this one. It is very clearly yes, because if the OC to AC ratio is higher, what will happen? Let us calculate OC to EC ratio. This means we have a more of scattering aerosols than compared to absorbing one. Okay. So, if this means there will be more of scattering compared to the actual absorption that is caused by the elemental carbon. So, scattering will increase. So, scattering, when the scattering increases, this means they will be having more of scattering, or they are cooling effects. We will discuss these implications in the later slides. One more important property of this one is here, that this is actually significantly water soluble in water. Okay. So, whereas the solubility of, if I just ask about solubility of elemental carbon in water is actually very close to 0, it is nearly 0. Elemental carbon is not cannot be dissolved in water. That is one of the very specific properties, whereas organic carbon can be dissolved in water, organic carbon can be dissolved in water. And then solubility, if you take total organic carbon, about 30 to 60% will be soluble in water. Then the next thing was that we have been discussing that what are the sources of aerosols. So, primary emissions is actually like primary biomass burning emission or fossil fuel emissions. These are the two major sources, either they are primary and they will be contributing, what they will be contributing? They will be contributing to organic carbon plus black carbon, okay, and they will be also giving VOCs here, volatile organic compounds. They are generally called primary organic aerosols. And this, so this means in the majorly, if you just say what are the primary carbonaceous primary emissions, they will be actually like biomass burning and fossil fuel emissions. But if you just see, it will give what it will give? It will give organic carbon and as well as black carbon, and then it will also give in the gaseous form. Now, the gaseous form cannot be talked about the particulate matter. So, what will happen? These species volatile organic compounds that are there in the atmosphere, in the presence of oxidizing radicals like OH, ozone and nitrate radicals, they are actually reacting and they are forming oxygenated compounds, diacid and nitrates. And because these they are actually they are volatile compounds, okay, this when they are oxidized, their volatility becomes less, they becomes less volatile, okay, they become less volatile, and when they become less volatile, they actually can be condensed on the other particles that is actually pre-existing. And then when they are condensed on the other particle that is there, suppose this is a particle, they will be condensed on this one like this, and then they will become part of aerosol. So, this will be now you have this system as aerosol. So, secondary organic aerosols consist of primary organic aerosols that is there actually here, okay. So, inside this one you have this one is all total primary organic aerosols, but this one actually like coating of the secondary organic aerosols that is produced from the atmosphere. So, this will have two components. So, carbonaceous aerosols can be defined in two primary and secondary organic aerosols, and then how they are formed we will be discussing in this one, okay. So, I think okay. One thing is very important, that why do we study carbonaceous aerosols? Because we know carbonaceous aerosols can affect physical and chemical properties of the aerosols. We have been discussing this one because they are hygroscopic, they can change the hygroscopicity, they can change the refractive index, they can change the albedo, and they can change the albedo here will be referred as single scattering albedo. So, we will discuss that one, and thus the atmosphere, and then chemical properties also, because some of the species they can be reactive, some can be non-reactive. So, and thus atmosphere they affect physical and chemical properties of aerosols, thus atmosphere and climate through interaction with reactive trace gases. We will discuss this one later, and water vapor, cloud and precipitation and radiation. We will have a different lecture, separate lecture on this one, like interaction of aerosols with cloud and precipitation as well as radiation. And then as I said, if you just see this one, they account about 20 to 70% of particulate matter. Let me be more specific in fine mode, okay, in fine mode. So, here fine mode I generally speak about PM10, and then more also one more thing that you have to add in urban areas. So, if you calculate the same thing in the rural areas, the ratios might be little higher, but in the urban areas the contribution becomes very high, because in the urban areas you have vehicular emissions plus you have industrial emissions apart from the other emissions that you have, and they contribute immensely to the carbonaceous aerosols, primary carbonaceous aerosols, okay. Then all particles not, but I said that organic carbon is actually part of this one is water soluble. So, it can water soluble carbon. So, this can act actually as a cloud condensation nuclei, but on the other hand black carbon actually it is called hydrophobic. Hydrophobic means water hater. So, this will not like water. So, if you have a black carbon particles and you try to put water on its surface, it will not hold water, but if you have a organic carbon here, water molecules, and because this is soluble, so it can water molecule. This is organic carbon, so this can be they can deposit on the surface. So the black carbon it will not. So what will happen? This will inhibit cloud formation. So it's actually not a scission. This is not a good scission. Okay, black carbon is not a good scission. So and whereas organic carbon can act as a good scission particles, because it can have actually hygroscopic in nature. Another very important, because this is actually like heating in the atmosphere. If there are some what you call secondary organic carbon is deposited even here, when the surroundings will become cooler, this has more energy. What will happen? So if this has more energy, it will be try to heat its surface, it will try to release its energy. So when it releases the energy, immediately there is a water vapor on this one, or water vapor here, and then water vapor can be evaporated. Okay, so this evaporation can be there, and when there will be an evaporation of this one because of the black carbon, this will not actually, even the scission was there, it was active as a scission, but it will not form the water. So cloud droplets will not form. No cloud formation. So this is very important. So you have to understand the concept from the very beginning. So thus organic carbon or carbonaceous aerosols, especially the organic carbon, they can act as a scission, and thus they can affect the precipitation. So if there is no cloud formation, what will happen? There will be no cloud formation, means there will be no rain. So you will not expect any rain. Then EC is the second most, remember, absorbing species in the atmosphere. Here I said that species after CO2. Okay, so CO2 is the strongest one, and this is the second most absorbing species in the atmosphere. And not only that, they can have a diverse effect on the human health. We will have another lecture on this one. Okay. So therefore, these characterization of carbonaceous aerosols, they need a comprehensive study, okay, by laboratory experiment, field measurement, and remote sensing and modeling. So you cannot do, if you just do one, you will not be able to completely characterize, and that is one of the very big problem, that in most of the literatures or most of the study, either one will be a very good experimentalist, or it can be only a kind of good remote sensing guy, or one will be kind of modeling. For example, I do mostly the chemical measurements in the laboratory experiments. We do collect samples from the field, but we don't do any kind of remote sensing or modeling expertise. So if you have to get, if you want to get whole idea about this one, you have to know this. Okay. Okay, so there are actually like different hot spots. These are the study sites that I did during my PhD days, and if you see here, this is actually kind of very big hot spot. What is there happening? This is actually over the Bay of Bengal. Okay. Now how do you expect this? This color indicates aerosol index. So aerosol index, just remember, AI is aerosol index, means aerosol, presence of aerosols, and if it is a red color means high aerosols, and if it is actually like yellow or green means less, very less, or close to 0 is blue. So if you see here, you don't have any aerosols, no aerosols. So you don't have any aerosols here, but you see surrounding areas of the actually in this part, Kolkata, and then this one, especially in the Bay of Bengal, the area that is very close to the coast side contains significant amount of aerosols. How it is possible? This is a very important question that was debated, and lots of studies, they were not able to understand that how it is happening and why it is happening. Then there is another, that why there is actually huge number of aerosols that is confined in this belt. This belt is called Indo-Gangetic plain, or sometimes the people call it Indo-Gangetic basin. You have lots of aerosols in these basins compared to, if you see here, it is a greener, so less aerosols. Okay, but if you see here on the other side, you have lots of aerosols here. Okay, this becomes very important, that why it is happening. So this is, we will see this one, why it is actually like this kind of things. So, in order to study this one, there was much of the study, the initial study was conducted in India, that is called Indo-X, and that paper was published in Science. It was a very important paper. The experiment was conducted during the January to March 1999 during the winter period, okay, over the Indian monsoon. So, even in the winter period, we have lots of emission in the Gangetic plain, and that emissions from this one that was transported to the Indian Ocean and especially the Bay of Bengal. Okay. So, if you see here, they found very high level of aerosol pollution and aerosol loading up to 20 microgram per cubic meter. Remember, this 20 microgram per cubic meter is quite low if I compare with the current situation. For example, these days the concentration somewhere might be 400 microgram per, 200 to 400 microgram per meter cube in the IGP. So, it's although it is reduced, of course that study was there in the 1999, the scenario has changed almost like 25 years. So, scenario has changed, this has also increased, and then concentration in the IGP has also increased. But the point here is that there was a high level of air pollution and aerosol loading was detected over the Indian Ocean. And then when they analyzed these samples, they did the chemical composition analysis and they found a large contribution from the anthropogenic aerosols. This is very important, that the source is what, and that's how many of these studies being, since then lots of studies have been conducted over India, and people started working after 2000 or so. And if you see the composition, what are the composition? Sulfate was alone, just see sulfate concentration alone was 30% or so, organics were 26%, black carbon was 14%, too much, it was too high, and then mineral dust was only 10%. This, remember, this is actually done in the fine mode, so this means PM 2.5 aerosols. So, as I said that in PM 2.5 or fine mode, black carbon concentration will be more, and I keep on saying that this concentration is actually 2 to 10%, but you see the concentration that was actually like 14%, so that is too much. And black carbon, organic carbon is 26, so here you can see that these two alone contributed about 40%, and then 30% from here, so 70% was contributed by this one. So there is huge aerosol pollution, and that's how they depicted and then confirmed that it is mostly anthropogenic emissions. But the scenario changed, and then the paper that came, and then India was actually like there was very big debate, and people started that okay, India is polluting a lot, and because India is using coal and all fossil fuel kind of things emissions, and this is giving to this kind of concentration in the Bay of Bengal. So this was very long debated, and then this paper came in Science again in 2005, and this was conducted by Chandra Venkatraman, Professor Chandra Venkatraman of IIT Bombay. She did actually a very important study in aerosol science over India. She measured emissions from the combustion of biofuel. So she used all kind of biofuels that are commonly used in India, like cow dung. Then she used different kind of leaves, different kind of woods that are there, and then she confirmed, she calculated that how much black carbon can be emitted from these sources alone, and she found that okay, the biofuel combustion in India is actually the largest. So it is not the kind of fossil fuel or coal based domination. So India is, the dominance was actually mostly from the biomass burning. And then if you see, there are lots of studies on India over the black carbon and radiative forcing, but composition was very little, and we did this some of these studies during 2005 to 2010, and then later on we are still continuing on these studies, and we found that PM 2.5 to PM 10 concentration in organic carbon in PM 2.5 can be even as high as 15 to 45%, but there was very little information of secondary organic aerosols. Still the data on secondary organic aerosols are missing, so we need to know more on these ones. Okay. So, as I said, this was long debated things. People started, actually this paper came in 2000, before this Indo-X experiment, Indian Ocean experiment. They produced this one. The Navaco paper was there in GRL, Geophysical Research, and which actually said that India is producing lots of aerosols dominated by the fossil fuel dominant. And then we started working, and Venkatraman paper follow up came in 2005, which suggested that, and then couple of papers came from this one. There was a very key paper that came in 2009 by Gustafsson et al., and that was again in Science. And then there was paper in JGR 2016 and 17, where they used carbon-14 measurements to conclude that what are the actually different sources, and they also found that actually 66% of carbon in India, total carbon, is actually biomass burning. So only we are producing some, say, around 32 to 30% or 33% from the fossil fuel. So this is one of the very important thing, and this is also we used some of the tracers. Don't worry about them. I will discuss this one, that how these tracers can be used, potassium OC to EC ratios, potassium to OC ratios, and led to 10 to this ratio. So these ratios can be used, and we also, using this ratio, we also found that Indian aerosols are actually mostly in the biomass burning dominated. They are not compared to what people have been suggesting. So this gives a kind of scenario that what was happening and what is happening in India now, but still the problem still remains the same. Even it is biomass burning dominated, it will contribute to the air pollution, and when it contributes to the air pollution, it's going to be a big risk, either in the health perspective, mostly in the health perspectives. And there have been several kind of observations from the Supreme Court even, and NGTs. Different research groups have been putting lots of effort on this one. For example, bringing the cleaner technology to reduce the air pollution. Indian government also did lots of things. Actually, they are putting electrical vehicles, CNGs were introduced, CNG vehicles were introduced. People were given in the CNGs are for the cooking purposes. They were given the LPGs, government Ujjwala scheme that was there from the government, that also contributed little bit on the reduction of the air pollution. But still we are not even very close to the what it should be the standard. We are much far ahead, almost factor of 5 to 6 times higher than what the WHO guidelines is there. So this is what we have to think, and we have to introduce and reduce this one. This is actually another slide. So as I said, that if you just remember in the previous slide, I was discussing that why these aerosols are actually confined here in the Gangetic plain. If you see here, and if you just see here, this is the slide that will give you actually that what are the controlling factors of air pollution in the Gangetic plain, and why Indo-Gangetic plain is so highly polluted. Okay, so this is very important here. Now what will happen here? We talked about the sources, we talked about the gaseous, natural and anthropogenic aerosols, as well as secondary aerosols. These sources are there. Then meteorology plays. This is I have not talked about. I have not talked about the meteorology, although I gave very little idea on this one. So we will just discuss this one. So what is happening? Shallower boundary layer height means trapping of the aerosols. So if you see, imagine a layer, and if you are putting more aerosols, if this imaginary layer or boundary layer is at this height from the ground, if this from the height from the ground is less, what will happen? You have less volume of, this means you have less volume is much lower, and this means the concentration, if I report in microgram per cubic meter, it will be much higher. Okay, so this is what is happening here. So if you are having a shallower boundary layer, this will trap the aerosols, and this will lead to increase in the concentration. Okay, as well as if you have low wind speed, then another very important thing, the wind speed with if you have high wind speed, then aerosols can be dispersed into the other places. but the dispersion is again also, even if you have very high wind speed, this dispersion is less in the Indo-Gangetic plain. We will discuss this one. Temperature and relative humidity. Relative humidity is relatively higher, so what will happen, there will be actually aerosols, they can actually accumulate water on this one, so that the particles can grow and they will scatter more radiation. And then this is very important, geography and topography. So if you look at the topography of the Himalaya, what is happening? Himalaya is like, a kind of, here you have this one and you have high mountains here, not exactly I am putting here, so please be careful with this one. And you have generally the wind speed is westerly, say in the winter time. What will happen? The wind is coming from here, there is another wind that is coming from here because of the cold wind from the Himalayas. Now there are two winds, one is actually trying to push this further here, but this wind is actually trying to put it here. So depending whether this wind is dominating or this wind is dominating, if this wind is dominating, then what will happen? This will try to put this aerosols on this side, it will disperse the aerosol in the central India. But if this wind is actually dominating, it will bring all the aerosols up to this one in the Bay of Bengal, and this will lead to high level of pollution in the Bay of Bengal. So this is actually a very big problem that is happening here. And if you see location like here in Varanasi, what is happening? You have sources of aerosols that are there itself in Varanasi, but at the same time you also have sources that is actually upwind locations. So upwind locations, they are also giving the aerosols. For example, the biomass burning events that is happening here, these aerosols will not be confined here, they will be again transported, because typically the aerosol lifetime is say a week to 10 days or even higher. So these aerosols, even when the wind speed is lower, they will be transported, and because they are very fine, they are produced by the burning activities, their size is very small, so they will actually not be deposited. So they will not be deposited, they will be contributing to the they will not be deposited, so they will remain in the atmosphere for longer time and they will be transported to other sites. So in the downwind side, they will contribute again. So this is another big problem that we have. So this is what is that controlling factor that is actually we talked about. Just to conclude this one, if I talk about what are the factors that now, so if just to conclude this one, what are the factors that affect air pollution? If somebody asks you, you should be able to tell you all the things actually. Emissions, traffic, industrial and domestic emissions, geography is very important, terrain is very important, then you have weather conditions, whether there is actually rain or winds, and one of the very important thing is that India, we don't get rainfall, we only get rainfall during the June, July, August, which is called monsoon period. So what will happen? During the other periods you don't have aerosol, though you don't have any rainfall, and we discussed that rainfall actually will scavenge the aerosols, but we don't have rainfall throughout the year. So this period we have very low aerosols, and as you see in the there will be not much things, but as the things moved from September to October, these emissions becomes increasing, and because the agriculture based burning also started, apart from the emissions that is there from the vehicular emission, industrial emission, and then other aerosol, biomass burning at home that is happening. And then second thing, during this period the temperature becomes lower. So what will happen when the temperature is lower? People will burn this biomass. So this is again contributing to the air pollution. So there is lots of things are going on, and it is very difficult, and there are lots of actually studies that is called source apportionment studies, that which source should be confined first. So they also do this one, but yes, it is not very much possible to do this one. So this is also, we will have seasonal variation, that's why. So during the winter season you will have very high concentration of aerosols. In June, July, August we have the lowest concentration. Time of the day, even the time in the day also there is a huge variability. During the morning hours, peak hours, when people are traveling, there will be lots of vehicles on the road, so their vehicular emission will be much higher, so the emission will be more. Then population density, if it is highly populated, people will be using more of energy, they will be using more of transport, they will be putting lots of vehicle will be there, and because of this one there will be especially in the urban areas or industrialized areas, there will be emission will be very high compared to the rural. So, if you just compare with the rural areas, this emission will be much higher. And then I didn't talk about much about the indoor and outdoor pollution. We will discuss this one later. So, I think I am getting the signal that I should stop here, because this lecture has to be finished. And I have this lecture we have discussed now carbonaceous aerosols, how India was blamed and that it is producing lots of fossil fuel, but then the studies that were conducted in India and our studies that were conducted in India, we reported that no, it is not actually all the things that is coming from the coal combustion or the fossil fuel emission. Biomass burning is the major chunk that is contributing to the air pollution. So, we need to, and because India being an agricultural economical country, it is very difficult to control those emissions, although there are lots of effort that are there, lots of research has been going on that how to convert those things, and I will discuss that one, that what are the problems, that why the agricultural burning becomes very more important during this season. So, with this I will stop here, and I will see you in the next lecture. I hope that you enjoyed, and I only will say that please keep reading, learning, that is very important. If you do not learn or if you do not revise your lectures, you will not be able to understand, and if you miss any of the lectures, you are subsequently going to other lectures, you will not be able to understand. So, they are interconnected. So, please try to understand the lectures as you go ahead. Okay. So, all the best and thank you so much.